Well, the way of analyzing presidential candidates based on their likability is nothing new, Sean. You know that. A lot of people always ask, who would you like to have a beer with? You know, it's a common question that people ask a lot around this time. So who is more likable now? Is it Trump or Biden? Let's discuss with our company conservative commentator Alicia Krause and associate research scholar and lecturer in politics at Princeton University, Lauren Wright. Ladies, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, I feel like I get this question all the time. It's like, who's the most likable here? We have two completely different candidates. Joe Biden, who likes to, pin himself as everyday Joe. And then you have the boss, Donald Trump, who we all, of course, know him from The Apprentice originally and Who Wants to Have a Drink with Their Boss. But I'm going to ask you one-on-one who you would like to have a drink with more. Would it be Trump or Biden? Lauren, I'm going to start with you as a newcomer.
I think it would stress me out a lot more to have a drink with the president right now. But, I think these things are tough. I remember the statistic very well in 2016 that Trump was this better to have a beer with candidate compared to Hillary. But I don't think it's as relevant right now because we're dealing with a huge pandemic, an economic disaster, and those are really the tangible things that Americans are focused on. So I'll let the other panelist give her take too.
Alicia, Lauren has a great point. People want to see Mr. Fix-It essentially right now. Do you agree? Who do you want to have a drink more with?
I think I'd have a drink with Biden and I'd still vote for Trump, but he really needs to step up his game. I mean, if he's going to say that he is a great commander in chief and he's so presidential, we're going to get bored of it. And you reference The Apprentice and his experience of having a multi-million-dollar company. I think there's a lot of Americans that are looking at their pocketbooks right now, that are looking at their kids who are unable to return to college and elementary schools across the country and saying, hey, where's this leader that we voted for? Where's the guy that we need to step up and do the thing that he said he's going to do well? So I'd rather him, I understand a president needs a break every once in a while. He can go golfing, but ignore the drink. He needs to get back to work.
Sean, what about you? Who would you rather have a drink with? I mean, you worked for the guy.
It's an interesting question. I kind of might go with Alicia on this. I'd probably rather, I know where I'm voting for Trump. And I've had dinner and lunch and breakfast with the guy. So there would be something neat about having a drink with Biden just because he doesn't like answering tough questions. He doesn't like doing interviews. So it would be I'd look at it more as an opportunity to ask him some stuff and see where he's really at. The irony of all ironies, we ask this in every presidential year, there's always like at least one candidate that doesn't even drink. So but I think the twist on this, which is interesting because Alicia touched on this, is we do want a leader right now through this pandemic thing, but there is this likability thing, right? That you want to know that the person is relatable to you. And so the interesting thing is we talked about this with Ron Kessler a moment ago, that the president does have this caring and generous side to him that he doesn't like to show. So, Alicia, let me punt it back to you for a second. Do you think that right now that that's a quality that needs to come out more? Or is it because we're in this pandemic and we've got an economic crisis that he should just be the leader and focused on that and not worry about the personality piece of it?
Here's the thing, though. I think the importance of being a good leader is showing empathy and being able to relate to the people that work for you or that you are representing, in this case, the constituents and the entirety of the United States of America. And I don't think it makes a president look weak if he, reaches out to those suburban women who Republicans have statistically been losing, unfortunately, since 2016 and says, I can relate to you. As a dad, I am also concerned about what's going on in your life. And here's what I'm going to do about it. And that in itself shows strength when you can show empathy and understanding. Yeah. And that's just my humble opinion.
Lauren, I agree with this. In fact, Lindsay brought it up a moment ago. When I talked to the president, I tried to bring that out of him. And there's just something about him being a tough business guy that doesn't want to show that softer side with him. But I agree. Part of it leading through a crisis is showing empathy and concern. Do you think that, the same thing I said to Alicia, but do you think that that is something that he should lean into, or because we're in a crisis, it's not as big of a factor?
Not only should he has to have any chance of beating Biden in November. And if you just look at his phone, for instance, or Twitter, or these personal attacks, or saying Dr. Birx's comments were pathetic, I think is the most recent one. So many Americans are sacrificing so much right now. And if he can't just put down the phone or keep himself restricted, restrict that personal style. I know it's important to him, and I know you probably have better insights than I do, Sean, Shirley, into why he has trouble doing that, but he really needs to stop. And it's not only hurting his campaign, it's making Americans feel that he's not paying attention, and he's more concerned with his popularity ratings and how people perceive him. Everything that comes out of the president's mouth right now needs to be, here's what I'm doing every minute of the day to help you and your family.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, like Sean mentioned, it's something that people are craving, I think, especially these suburban women voters. But something interesting, I think, Steve Krakauer, we've on the show several times. He's the Fourth Watch editor. He actually did an email interview this weekend with Billy Bush. And he asked him, what are critics and fans missing about the real Trump? And here's what Billy said. I thought it was really interesting. I'm going to get your guys' response. He said, one thing of which you cannot accuse Trump is pretending to be someone he's not. It's so true. He said from the outset 5 years ago, tough today, he has shown his true colors. And he goes on to talk about, how he's this tough guy persona, what we're seeing, that he's this businessman, Alicia. It's just who he is through and through. And so we can't get upset, that he is just who he is. He loves the media attention, and he loves having this tough guy persona. So I don't really think we can hold our breath, but I don't really think we're actually going to see a change here.
I don't expect that we would see a massive change. I mean, he's over 70 years old. It's kind of baked into the cake, so to speak. They say that actually happens in people's personalities in their mid-teens, that kind of they are who they are, and you really can't change them. But I think that there are still things that he needs to recognize, and he needs to recognize that in this COVID world that we now live in, or the sickness, as my children call it, it's a very different electoral process and like an election field than he had in 2016 when he was up against the worst candidate, I think, in American history. Joe Biden is a pretty bad candidate. Joe Biden just needs to sit down and keep his mouth shut, because that ends up looking better for him in the polling, as we've seen recently. But there are things that Trump needs to slightly pivot and do in order for him to overcome some of these recent polling losses, because once again, Joe Biden is bad, but he ain't as bad as Hillary Clinton. And Trump needs to take note of this in order to really solidify his reelection in November.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Dick Morris has brought up, and we've consistently talked about, is that every issue right now is getting seen through the lens of the coronavirus. So how your well-being is, how your health security is, your kids, everything is being seen by how the pandemic is affecting our lives. And until that pandemic curve is flattened, that's the thing that he's got to worry about the most, because the economy is secondary now and is a symptom of what's going on with the disease. Thank you both for being here. Look forward to following up soon.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, well, a lot of hot button topics, Sean, that we've discussed today, and we'll be right back with our take after the break.